Hello, I am Ryan Skinner, and this is my digital presentation on Ludwig van Beethoven. So let's get into it. We're going to start with his birth right off the bat. No one knows exactly when Ludwig van Beethoven was born, but they can guess since he was baptized on December 17th in 1770. He was probably born sometime during the 16th or 15th of December in Bonn, Germany. And actually, it's his 250th anniversary coming up very soon, so there's that to look forward to. I know we were talking about that a bit earlier, but COVID sort of hit, but that's not going to stop me from looking forward to it. Let's get into his childhood. When you think of perhaps a famous composer or like famous composers in Germany, you might think of like powdered wigs and balls and like glamorous people like from the aristocracy. But Beethoven, while that may be where he ended up working near, he was never really a person who was part of the aristocracy. He was born a poor child and typically was more of a quiet, introspective boy. But he took a very quick liking to music, as many of his family noticed. And his father definitely noticed, who would eventually go on to pay for his musical education. Although his father wasn't always the nicest of men and perhaps paid for his education because he believed it would make his son famous, Beethoven never paid that too much mind and just took what he got, which was the musical education. He gave his first performance when he was only 8 years old in Cologne, Germany, and he composed his first piece at age 12. Now, with his career as a composer, his early works were inspired very much by Mozart. As a matter of fact, a lot of people considered him to be the next Mozart, since he was such a gifted child with music at a young age like Mozart was. Beethoven would eventually go to Vienna to study under another famous composer known as Joseph Haydn. Although Haydn was a bit critical of some of Beethoven's works, and a bit of Beethoven's more gruff and quick-to-anger temperament came out then. And is highlighted there. They had a few fallings out and arguments, but they eventually would make up for it. But unfortunately for Beethoven, although he was making a lot of works, and we'll get to his compositional output soon, Beethoven was starting to have troubles hearing at around age 28, which would be very detrimental to him. But he still kept pressing forward anyway, even despite his hearing problems. He was considered to be the next Mozart. A famous little incident I might want to highlight, though, is something you've heard a lot, perhaps in the documentaries, if you're a senior like me, that you've watched in orchestra, which is about Beethoven's piano duel with a famous piano player known as Steibelt. And they sort of played pieces against each other. Steibelt performed a piece of his own making to impress a crowd, and then when it was Beethoven's turn, Beethoven walked over to the piano, very brutally picked up his piece of paper, Steibelt's paper, flipped it over, and played his piece, improvised a little sort of ditty off the piece that Steibelt had played, sort of shaming him and forcing him out of Vienna, disgraced. But you may be asking, alright, why Beethoven? What makes Beethoven so great? And actually, you're not the first person to ask this, so I'm going to actually play this little clip from Peanuts here to hear someone else ask the same question.
What kind of Christmas music is that?
Beethoven Christmas music.
What has Beethoven got to do with Christmas? Everyone talks about how great Beethoven was. Beethoven wasn't so great.
What do you mean Beethoven wasn't so great?
He never got his picture on bubblegum cards, did he? Have you ever seen his picture on a bubblegum card? How can you say someone is great who's never had his picture on bubblegum cards?
Alright, I'm sure, like, at my age, I don't even know what a bubblegum card is, but Lucy does bring up a good point. Why Beethoven? Why was Beethoven so great? So let's talk about that a bit. First, we'll look at his compositional output, which you can read some of the numbers here, but basically, what he totaled up to was around 772 works, which is a lot considering how much he went through, and I'll actually talk about that a bit later. But just imagine sitting down and writing 772 pieces of work from scratch. But why Beethoven was so important to classical music in general, and why he's important to a orchestra's repertoire, is he's considered the father of the Romantic era. Now wait, what's that? What's the Romantic era, may you be asking? And the Romantic era is the era that happened after there are three main periods in classical music, all over the place. Three main periods in classical music there is that you might hear of the most, which is the Baroque, the Classical, and the Romantic periods. Now, classical versus Romantic. Classical is sort of what Mozart brought around, and Romantic is what Beethoven is considered to have started. The difference between Romantic and classical music really is that Romantic is focused more on the emotion of the piece. While there is, obviously there's emotion in classical pieces, but classical is also very rooted in the aristocracy and rooted in sort of having a formula and a way of doing things. It's very, traditional. and Romantic sort of broke away from that, saying sort of like, music is more than just those who make it. It's about those who listen to it. It's about emotion and the people, and that was very important to Beethoven. And you can sort of see a shift in his works that I'll probably, if you listen closer to the music I'm playing in the back of this recording here, you'll be able to perhaps hear some differences, and I'll play a little bit off the end, and I'll provide the links and all that. But yeah. So let's get to the later in life. Later in life, Beethoven had to come into terms with his deafness. He became more of a recluse from society, considering he couldn't really hear anything, and his output dropped drastically. And it was a very dark and sad time for Beethoven. Just a famed composer not able to really hear or write anymore. It's really just the thought of it is very just a tragedy in of itself. And he suffered a lot in his life, like harsh critics perhaps, and just losing his ability to perform and play, despite that being his passion, what he wanted to do. He even, I didn't touch on it too much, but he also had a bit of unrequited love, which really shattered him, and Beethoven never really came back from that. But this transitions into the next thing I want to talk about, which is what does Beethoven mean to me? Why is he so important to me? There's a picture of me dressed as Beethoven, for those of you who were with in the class last year. But anyway, why he's so important to me is his triumph over tragedy. Beethoven had such a tragic man, and very serious, and life just kept hitting him back and forth with lots of different struggles and problems. But he never stopped, and he kept on going and making lots and many works. And many of which, even though he was struggling, are known, worldwide. You could ask almost anyone on the street, who is Beethoven? Who was Beethoven? You know who Beethoven is? And they would probably answer you yes. Regardless of social position, regardless of country, they probably would be able to tell you who Ludwig van Beethoven is, which I think is just a testimony to how much he triumphs over his deafness and over his problems with mental health and just all his struggles. There's actually a very famous Beethoven quote I have right here that says, "There are and always will be thousands of princes, but there is only one Beethoven." And I think that really speaks to me. And, well, that's about the end of my presentation here. Here are my sources. And, I will provide the links to the music again. And I've been playing some of it in the background, and I hope you enjoy.